Hello, everybody. My name's Amanda Laven. I'm a composer and sound designer. I've worked in games for the last 6, almost 7 years. And today we're going to talk about how to talk about what your story sounds like. So again, composer, sound designer. I'm from right here in the Capital Region. I went to Union College. I have an MFA in music composition. I started my career working in QA at Vicarious Visions on Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, and then worked on Diablo 4 as an audio tester. Moved on to a studio called House of How, where I was a composer and sound designer for an unannounced game that remains unannounced. Then I was at Eyes Out working as a sound designer on a horror game called Sleep Awake, which came out last December. And now I am at Escape Velocity Entertainment as an associate sound designer as of last month. So I also have 2 kids, 2 cats, and a lot of yarn. So why does sound matter? If you think about it, sound is a sense you cannot shut off. You are always receiving audio information. Even when you lay down to go to sleep at night and you close your eyes, you do not close your ears, unless you're like me and you sleep with earplugs. But for the most part, you're always receiving information through sound, a lot of which you don't even notice. But it is such a valuable tool when you are building an interactive experience to deliver information to your player, to set mood, to tell us about characters, to build your world. So it's often said that good sound design goes unnoticed, that no one can tell if the sound design is good. They can only tell if it's bad. And that's because if it's done right, it just becomes part of the experience and just deepens your immersion into the world. So what does sound give us? What can you use sound to give to your audience? It gives us characterization. Where's this character from? What is their accent? What is their social position relative to the player and to other characters? What mood are they in? What do they feel about the player or the situation that they're in? All of these things, by describing the tone of voice, by describing the accent or the language that they're speaking in, even without ever playing a sound, if you give descriptive enough information, you can give us a lot about the character by talking about the sound of their voice. It can tell us about setting. What is the technology level of our current setting? What is the population like? What sort of wildlife is in the area? What time of day is it? Are we in a sci-fi future? Are we in the medieval past? Are we in a crowded city? Or a silent desert? Or a lively rainforest? Or are we deep under the sea? All of these things are going to sound very different. You can establish a mood using sound. Are we in danger? Are there sirens blaring while bombs explode all around us? Or are we sitting at a campfire listening to some food sizzling over the fire and someone strumming a guitar? It can tell us about a relationship with a character. Is this person trustworthy? Again, through tone of voice and other things. It can give us gameplay information. So if you are developing a story that is more than written, right? If you're actually able to move around in the world and hear things in the world, you can give your player information about what's in their environment. Are there enemies nearby? Did this attempt succeed or fail? Is this object interactable or not? Are footsteps and growls getting closer? That's a way you can indicate danger. Or are they occluded by walls? That item playing in a tracked loop, is that something that the player can actually interact with? It's a way that you can pull players towards particular areas in your world and encourage them to interact with it. So then, now that we know why we care about sound and why we want the player to have sound, or at least a description of sound, even if you don't have audio in your game, how do we talk about it? So sound is intangible. It's not something that you can reach out and touch. It's not something you can see with your eyes. And again, even though we're hearing all the time, a lot of what we're hearing is something that we tune out and we don't necessarily think about that much. So that can make sound seem really mysterious and intimidating, but you actually don't need to know a lot of audio terminology to effectively describe a sound. In fact, it is much better to use words you and your audience can easily understand. And that's whether you're talking to a sound designer who's going to make sound for your game or your audience directly using words. So there's a couple different ways we can talk about sound. First, let's talk about how do you directly describe a sound. So some of the words that you are going to want to know are things like volume. Is a sound loud or is it soft? Is it ear splitting? Does it make you need to cover your ears? Does it hurt to listen to? Or is it barely audible? Or is it somewhere in between? You can also think about the pitch of the sound. Is it high-pitched or low-pitched? So for example, a baby's cry or a tweeting bird is an example of a high-pitched sound, whereas something like a jet engine rumble is going to be a very low sound. And then you can talk about quality of the sound. Is it a smooth sound? Is it clear? Is it pleasant to listen to? Something like a vocalist, a skilled vocalist sustaining a note is an example of a smooth sound versus a jackhammer, like jacking away at a stone is going to be a much more jagged, rough, irregular sound. When we talk about clarity, someone speaking directly to your face is probably going to be pretty easy to understand versus if I turn away and I mumble like this. If I turn away and I mumble or I whisper or I'm faced away from you, you probably aren't going to be able to understand exactly what you're hearing. And then pleasantness is kind of self-explanatory. You probably don't want to listen to a fire alarm blaring for hours and hours, but a crystal singing bowl is something you might put that on in your background and listen to it all day while you work, right? So those are ways we talk about sound directly. There are other ways you can give information about a sound without directly describing what it sounds like. So you can tell the player or your sound designer what information they should be getting from this sound. Where is it? How far away is it? Is it indicating a successful action or a failed action? Is the sound in the sky? Is it coming from underground? Is it right in your ear? Is it miles away? Are there things in between the sound source and the listener? Someone standing right outside that door may be able to hear that someone inside this room is talking, but they may not be able to make out the words. Does the sound mean something positive or something negative? Is it a good sound that the player wants to hear that indicates that they have been successful or that something positive is happening? For example, if you have a healing mechanic in your game, that's probably a positive sound, and you probably want the player to have a positive association with it, versus if there's a damage mechanic, you probably want them to have a negative association with that sound. Again, we can talk about the emotion of a sound, and that can apply not just to like an individual character emotion, but also just a sound itself. Sounds mean different things to different people. Nostalgia is definitely a thing, and what's nostalgic to me is not necessarily nostalgic to you. So being able to describe the feeling that you want the player to have is very important. But it can also directly describe an emotion that a character is feeling or expressing. So for example, if someone is speaking, are they angry or are they loving or are they disinterested? You can use these words to describe the tone of a character's voice. If you're hearing a crowd, are they excited or are they afraid? Is this environment lonely or overwhelming? Another way to talk about this is comparison, simile and metaphor. If you're here, you're likely a writer, and so you're very familiar with simile and metaphor. They work wonderfully for sounds. A rumble like a jet engine, a voice like a lion's roar. You can get much more metaphorical. The alarm clock was an air raid siren, triggering fight or flight before my eyes had even opened. The click of the mouse may as well have been the sound of a guillotine blade crashing down. Like, these are ways you can evoke strong emotion without saying anything more than the mouse did a click sound. You don't have to talk about was it high-pitched or low-pitched or loud. You get the sense of it, right? Of what the sound means to the character. Another really interesting way is to invoke synesthesia. So if you're not familiar, synesthesia is a connection between your senses. So some people can see sounds or taste colors. I have a very mild form of this where it's not really linking different senses, but letters and numbers have color to me. So things that are not traditionally linked, you can describe sounds like smells. The forest sounds as green as it looks, you know, a color. The bird call smells like a field of flowers from my youth. The singer's velvety baritone sounds like dark chocolate melting on my tongue. The derision in her voice was a knife to the heart. So you can get really flowery with your language, and you can really invoke the emotion of the sound without having to get super descriptive about what it actually sounds like. And these tools can be useful when talking to sound designers as well to give them a sense of what emotion you're going for. Audio references. I apologize. My notes are on paper because this is a PDF, so that's why I have to keep looking down. So beyond simple descriptions and comparisons, direct references to existing recordings or existing sounds can be very useful when you're trying to communicate about sound. And it doesn't need to be copy-paste. It doesn't need to be, you show this video to a sound designer and you want them to rip it off exactly. But being able to talk about the qualities that your desired sound shares with your reference is essential. So that's where we come back to those words like volume and pitch. Being able to talk about what part of the sound you are interested in. So when using references, you can use a direct reference. Sometimes you want your player to imagine an exact sound, like the Mario 1-up sound, or the notes of the Westminster chime, which you've all been hearing coming from that tower in the middle of campus. You may instead want to just talk about part of a sound. Like if you're talking to a sound designer and there's a sound that you like, you might want to be able to explain which particular part of that sound it is that you like. The tone of a cello, the initial click of a keyboard, the whistle of a tea kettle, ignoring all of the other sounds that might be there, like the heat source and the bubbling. Or instead, you may want to think about the quality or mood of a sound. A nostalgic quality, for example, a cartoony quality of an impact sound, the sound of the bass line in the Rugrats theme, that little whom, right? The melancholy of like a solo whale call, like just one whale in the ocean making a call, is a really sad sound to think about. So being able to explain what part or quality of a sound you want your audience or your sound designer to focus on is essential. And so in summary, I don't have a summary slide. Oh, here we go. Don't use words you don't understand. Please don't use words you don't understand. One example of this that I've heard is a client talking to a composer, not me, but someone I know, kept telling the composer that the music was too dissonant, and that didn't make a lot of sense because it was in a major key and it was very upbeat, happy, consonant sound, and the composer got to the point where they literally could not make it any more consonant, and then found out the client meant the opposite of that, meant that they wanted it to be more dissonant. So if you don't know the word, please don't use it. That said, you should learn some very basic audio terminology, things like volume, pitch, and quality. Use commonly understood words, whether you're talking to your audience or your sound designer. Focus on information and emotion where direct description fails. Get poetic. Use simile and metaphor, and use references wisely. And thank you very much. There's my contact info, and I'm happy to answer questions. Are there questions?
Right, so I have a hobby game that's been a backwards project for a while that I got like some basic sounds in it, some visual novel type of thing. But like I'm one person, it's not my specialty. So like given limited resources and expertise and knowledge of what's out there for free resources, what if you were in that position would you prioritize for sound?
Gotcha. So the question is, if you are a non-sound designer and you are building a game and you need to put sound in yourself, how do you know what to prioritize and where to get sounds from? So in that case, you really want to think about information the player might need, first and foremost. I think you said you're working on a visual novel, so you may not need your audio to deliver exact information. For example, if you're building like a shooter, audio becomes very, very important because people will actually use it to play the game. They will rely on it to play the game. But you really want to focus on whatever's going to have the most impact to your audience. So whatever is going to communicate the emotion, the mood, the narrative beats that you want them to get, that's where you're going to want to focus on. And there are a lot of resources out there for free sounds. And there are also things on asset stores as well, where you can get sounds that people have designed. Some are for free, some are paid. So there are options out there for that.
I didn't know where to find those, whether you want to elaborate, that is fine, but, it's like, probably most of what I have is, ambient with a few specific sound effect cues. And I have like a piece of like royalty-free music that I've kind of tried to put in, but I don't know if it's something that's gonna stay there, because music seems like maybe it's a rather more specific thing.
It really depends. If a sound or a track, so the extension was just a little more information about the game and the question of using royalty-free music and whether it really suits or not. If it's detracting from the experience, first of all, the number one rule in audio is do no annoying. So any sound you have that is irritating, any music you have that gets annoying, fix it. Get rid of it. It's better to have nothing there than to be annoying your player. So if you're not certain about it, if you feel that it's not adding to the experience and may even be detracting, then yeah, absolutely, you're going to want to, you'd be better off without. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm also locally popular.
Yeah, perfect. Cool. Hi.
Hi. So I do sound design development as a hobby. And it's like you get those more metaphorical kind of prompts, I guess. Like it's like maybe a sound that's like sun on my face in the morning. It's like what do you kind of do with that? I guess that's like the sound designer. Like where do you take that? How do you figure out what sound that is?
Gotcha. So the question is, when you do get a description as a sound designer, when you get a description that is more metaphorical or less direct, how do you use that? So the first thing I would do is have a bit of a conversation and a bit of a back and forth where, okay, I hear what you're saying to me, and here's how I'm interpreting that, and try to add some additional language around it and see if I'm like getting in the right direction here. If that's going well, or even if it's not, then I would potentially turn to some reference, see if I could get them to give me some sounds, if they could just tell me some sounds that kind of have that feeling for them, or associations, or pull up some videos and start doing that kind of back and forth. And then I would probably go to just doing a pretty quick sketch of a sound and sending that and seeing what kind of feedback I can get and just iterating rapidly. Like I said, I just started a new job about a month ago, and I'm working with a senior sound designer who is directing my work. And we've had a lot of back and forth on something that is even a very simple sound, just to get that sense of, where we're going with it. I think we've done like 7 different versions of what is a very simple sound, but it's very important to getting that communication down and getting that sense of what you want. So don't be afraid to iterate and do that quickly. Don't spend a lot of time polishing a sound that you're not certain is the right sound. Does that help? Great. I saw a hand here. Hi.
I've heard from a few of my peers and friends who work in sound in film and in games that sound can often be thought of as this like post-production realm. So sound is being sort of brought in, and sometimes it's felt by them as kind of like an afterthought. Do you have a perspective on this, or like a choice for indie developers who might be looking to outsource some of their sound creation as to like when we should be bringing you in? What's like the best time?
Gotcha. So the question is, historically, sound in games or in film and elsewhere is often thought of as like a post-production thing where you get everything locked down and then you bring your sound designer in at the end. For games in particular, that is not anymore really the way that things are done, because especially in video games, audio systems are often so robust. They are so closely linked to the game design itself, and audio becomes part of the game design. And audio in games, if you're going to have sound in your game and you want full coverage sound in your game, everything makes sound, and sound is tied to everything else. So you really want to get your sound designer in there as early as possible, especially if you're having them implement and if you're having them build out systems that are more complicated than like click button, make sound. You want to get them in kind of as early as possible. So start having those conversations with people, start talking to people that you know, and finding, you know, someone who might be a good fit for your project. You do really want to start that kind of as early as possible. Does that answer your question? Cool. Are there any more questions? Are there Discord? Am I supposed to check Discord for questions? I don't know how to check Discord for questions. Does anyone know? Oh, I'm sorry. There's a question here.
A funny question, I guess. Is there a memory from a job or a project where it was just the most difficult sound to nail, whether it was iterating it or just figuring out what to put in?
The question is if I have a specific anecdote from a project where it was really difficult to nail down a specific sound. I would say not necessarily that this was difficult, but it was a sound that was extremely important. When I was working on Sleep Awake, I was a contract sound designer at Eyes Out on this horror game, Sleep Awake, and I was working with the audio lead, Jordan Jarrett. And there was a set of sounds that's very core to the narrative. It's actually a really important plot point, and parts of that sound are heard throughout the game. And so that was a really tricky thing to do, to think about the layers of this sound, how they relate to all of the different characters in the game and the overarching plot of the game, and then how to use that sound in such a way that it made sense with the different layers of it. It would be a lot to describe exactly, like to go into exact detail of what this sound is, but it was a multi-layered sound that parts of it would be heard in parts of the game, and the whole thing wouldn't be really heard till like the end. And so because it was such a narratively important sound, nailing that down was very, very important. So I think that would be my go-to for that. Do we have more questions, or do we have Discord questions, or no? Okay. Thank you.